I just wanted to start this by saying thank you to all of the people who have trusted me enough to invest in my book, The Doctrine of Wing Chun Kuen. Today we hit a milestone of 1,000 copies sold all over the world, which is crazy to me because I would have just been happy with 100, just gone out to my friends up the street. So this is amazing. I'm seeing a cultural shift as well. I'm seeing how the information has been really taken aboard by the Wing Chun community and has changed the way that practitioners are interacting with each other and talking about strategy, tactics, techniques, joint depths, SCCO and the like, as opposed to my lineage being stronger than your lineage. This is a great honor for me and to give back to a martial art that has given me so much. So thank you all, and the new edition will be coming out real soon. Due to the success of the book, I've been in contact with many masters and practitioners across a plethora of lineages all across the globe. And of course, my inbox is now full due to the latest offering or attempt to rewrite history from our favorite researcher and snake oil salesman. So let's dive in and see what he's trying to get you to believe now. This researcher says that now the Foshan Museum's investigations are in line with his own and have caused him to re-edit his own book, therefore showing how malleable he is and how willing he is to change in the face of better information. He insists that the researchers spent years getting this information, collating it, but all of these claims have been thoroughly debunked in the video series that I've done quite comprehensively, complete with references and evidence, etc. The fact that he maintains this was outright lie. It's either delusional or he's just trying to stop you from believing your lying eyes. Just to recount very quickly what I uncovered in my investigations and what I presented to you guys. So here's something else to consider. The Foshan Museum opened its doors to the public recently, and they had a large display on martial arts in Foshan and Guangzhou. They had notes and all these other manuals that were given to them by other Sifus from other lineages, but guess which one of the notes was not up there? If you guessed the snake crane ones, you would be correct. I can't wait to hear this person's explanation as to why they weren't up there. I guarantee it'll be some kind of conspiracy theory. I know you guys won't fall for it. This individual then goes into the fact that all the information he'll be presenting is not any kind of attack on Ip Man or his legacy. So let's be precise about what attacking a legacy actually means. It doesn't require bad intentions necessarily, but if you draw poor conclusions from poorly examined resources and badly conducted investigations, and then proceed to go and spread the conclusions you've made loudly to as large an audience as you possibly can, all the while not engaging with any of the corrections or counter evidence provided to you by superior researchers, then the damage to people's understanding of that history is the same regardless of your stated motives. People in Hong Kong and China are not upset because they misunderstood this person's intentions. They're upset because the claims he is making and continue to make are simply wrong, badly researched. And because these claims affect real lineages and real people, that's not really a misunderstanding. Those people being annoyed with him is a consequence of his actions. This individual then goes on to state that Ip Man began studying under his teacher, Wah Shun, at the age of 9, and that his teacher died 2 years later, which will make Ip Man 11. In doing so, he's implying that Ip Man had barely any time to learn anything meaningful from his teacher. And he says that, what can you really learn in 2 years? And that this fact cannot be denied, but it can. So there's two problems here. First of all, the death date. Ip Man was born in 1893. His teacher died in 1913, not when Ip was 11. Depending on which starting date you choose, because the sources vary, Ip Man was actually 7, 9, or 13. There's not a general consensus, right, known as a fact that cannot be denied. So the gap between Ip Man beginning training and when his teacher died is considerably more than 2 years. It's not really interpretation, it's just basic maths. The second implication in what this individual says is that even if we accept the shorter timeline, that the suggestion you can't learn very much in 2 years in traditional Chinese martial arts is not supported at all by how those arts are traditionally trained and learned. Intensive daily instruction under a dedicated teacher produces some serious foundational skill. It's very common for practitioners to become very proficient in a short period of time. It doesn't take years and years, 20 or 25 years. This was a Western framework built onto the traditional Chinese martial arts simply to make more money from you. To support his timeline and to give himself a shameless plug and position himself with some authority, this person references Lung Ting's book, Roots and Branches of Wing Chun. Problem is, he appears to have taken one detail in isolation without checking it against the death date of Wah Shun, which is documented elsewhere actually. You see, the date of Wah Shun's death is quite an important detail, and to get that wrong due to shoddy research or just lazy reading is one of the main reasons why this person continually finds himself in hot water, being debunked repeatedly over and over. Further to that, after Ip Man's teacher passed away, it is asserted that Ip Man continued to train a little bit with his seniors, Jo Sao and Chan Yu Min. A little bit is doing enormous work in that sentence for this person, especially when he provides no evidence to support it. What we actually know is that Ip Man continued his training until he left for Hong Kong, and that was around 1909. That's several more years of focused instruction under experienced practitioners. In traditional Chinese martial arts, training under your Sihing after your Sifu's passing is completely normal and recognized as part of your development. It's not really a footnote in this story, it's an important part of Ip Man's education and understanding of his martial arts going forward. I hope you've seen the game that is being played here by this individual. By framing Ip Man's training as just being a little bit, is setting a gap, a void that this person seeks to fill with his Yuen Kay San theory. But the issue is, the gap he's describing doesn't exist. It's in historical record. Okay, there's a lot to go through here, and I'll try and make it as succinct as possible. And if people want more details, I'll be happy enough to make another video. This idea that Ip Man learned from Yuen Kay San is the core of this person's narrative, and it's where we have to spend most of our time. So let me walk you through this carefully. So the story goes like this. The Ip family, who are quite well-to-do, got into a situation which resulted in their family estate, quite a large one, being burnt down. As a result, they elected to move in with the Yuen family. And whilst there, Ip Man's friend Yeun Kay San introduced him to Wing Chun and the three forms, etc. And this person argues, is where Ip Man really learnt his art from. Let's pull all of these claims apart. First of all, we'll begin with the fire. The Ip family were, like I said, quite rich, and their estate quite large. They owned multiple businesses and multiple properties. If their main estate had burnt down to the ground, that would have been quite a significant event, the kind of thing that would have been documented in local records. However, researcher Mr. Tam went through the historical archives himself, specifically looking for the record of this fire, and there is none. No mention of damage, no mention of any police records or newspaper articles, no fire, nothing. More to the point, if your family was wealthy enough to own all of these businesses and properties, why would you embarrassingly go crawl to your friend's house and ask if you can be put up there for a while? Why not just move into one of your other properties that haven't been burnt down? This would be simple logic, right? But as this person has exhibited many times before, the lack of critical thinking has resulted in the logic of the story not holding up even on its own terms. Now, let's look at who Yeun Kay San actually was and where his Kung Fu actually came from, because this matters enormously. Yeun Kay San himself claimed Fong Su Ching as his teacher, but Fong Su Ching was a practitioner of Wing Chun, a related, possibly, and structurally different system with a completely different curriculum. And according to Som Nung himself, one of Yeun Kay San's most prominent students, Yeun hadn't actually learnt very much from his first teacher, Fok Bu Chun, and later claimed Fong Su Ching because he admired him so much. So if Yeun Kay San claims Fong Su Ching as his teacher, and his teacher taught a different system, where then did Yeun Kay San's actual Wing Chun curriculum come from? Because here's the thing, Yeun Kay San's curriculum, Su Lim Tao, Chum Kyu, Butzi, Dummy, Pole, Knives, is structurally identical to the curriculum of every other descendant of Wah Shun. So the answer seems pretty obvious, especially when, according to multiple independent sources from people who were actually there, is that Yeun Kay San studied under Ng Jo Sao. Ng Jo Sao was a senior student of Wah Shun and Ip Man's own Sihing. There are sources, not one, but multiple independent witnesses. UK states Yeun Kay San studied under Ng Jo Sao. Fok Chu states Yeun Kay San learned from Ng Jo Sao. Li Man states that Yeun Kay San was a student of Ng Jo Sao. Chao Gong Yu states directly Yun, also known as Yeun Kay San, is a disciple of Ng Jo Sao. Gok Fu and Lung Gai noted that Yeun Kay San didn't even acknowledge that what he had learnt from his own brother was Wing Chun. Instead, he called it snake style. That is 6 independent sources all pointing in the same direction. This is what proper historical triangulation looks like. Not the same story repeated by 6 people who heard it from the same place, but 6 separate witnesses with their own observations, all arriving at the same conclusions independently. Where does the story of Ip Man learning from Yeun Kay San even come from? Well, it traces back to Som Nung, and even there, it's far more modest than what this individual is claiming. In Som Nung's own written pamphlet on Wing Chun, here is actually what he says. Ip Man came to learn from Yeun Kay San after he had already established his martial arts school in Hong Kong, to seek refinement of chi sao and fighting principles. Not the forms, not as a boy, after, as an adult, as an established teacher. Even if you accept that story in its entirety, it describes a seasoned teacher seeking to polish his skills, not a young man receiving the foundations of his system. The individual pushing this particular narrative has taken the most modest of claims and expanded it into Ip Man learning the 3 forms from Yeun Kay San as a boy. There is no source for that version of this story, not one. Some people have taken it upon themselves to point to the notes written by Lung Nao in the 1950s as hard evidence, a lineage document showing that Ip Man is connected to Yuen Kay San. A few things need to be understood here about this. First, just because something is written down does not make it true. Lineage documents in martial arts are not neutral historical records. They are often politically motivated, written to establish status, and need to be critically examined like any other source. The existence of mermaids, for instance, in medieval text does not prove that mermaids exist. Second, those notes were written in the 1950s. That's after Ip Man had already left Hong Kong. Yet every contemporary witness who was actually present in that community during the 1940s or even earlier, such as Li Man, Lung Gai, Guok Fu, Fok Chu, all describe Yeun Kay San as a student of Ung Sao. Now ask yourself why there is no stories of Ip Man learning from Yeun Kay San before the 1950s, and why do they emerge after Ip Man had left and become famous? Third point, the notes themselves contradict other documents. Yeun Kay San's own grandson, Yu Jiaotong, who had the privilege of spending some time with, he was an amazing person, a man with every reason to defend and expand his grandfather's legacy, did not take the same hard position as the person pushing this narrative. The lineage tree in Lung Nao's notes has a list of Yuen Kay San's students. However, the lineage tree from Fong Su Ching's school in Guangzhou shows the same names as being part of the same generation as Yuen Kay San. Specifically, names like Ma Zhongyu appear in Lung Nao's notes as a generation below Yuen Kay San. However, they appear in the Fung lineage tree as peers of Yuen, direct students of Fong Su Ching. The document that this researcher is treating as proof contradicts itself when placed next to independent records. So this researcher goes on to cite multiple people that support the narrative or his narrative, and they include Leung Jam Sing and Robert Chu amongst others. But this is not what multiple source verification means in historical research. If every one of those sources heard the story from the same original source or from someone who heard it from the same place, you don't have independent verification. If 1 million people told a story of pigs flying, it doesn't mean flying pigs exist. It means that only one story spread very widely. Real triangulation means independent witnesses with no shared source, all arriving at the same conclusions through their own direct knowledge. That is exactly what we have with Yeun Kay San learning from Ung Sao, and it is exactly what we don't have for Yeun Kay San teaching Ip Man the three forms. This individual also saw fit to try and drag in the respectable researcher and martial artist Robert Chu to his cause by putting up a quick edit of an interview he did, without his permission may I add, to try and bolster his claim. I know Robert Sifu very well, and we had a good chat, and he also clarified that he does not believe that Yeun Kay San taught Ip Man the three forms. This individual goes on to claim that the Wah Shun lineage didn't originally have the three forms, Sunim Tao, Chum Q and Buji, and that they were introduced far later. He even goes on to claim that a senior master, speaking under the influence of alcohol in the 1980s, drunkenly and privately confided that the forms were adopted far more recently. The problem with this claim is that it is demolished by the documented evidence from multiple independent sources across different geographical locations. Let's go through them. Let's start with Ah Hong's manuscript. In the early 1980s, Leung Tin was given a manuscript written by this individual who was a direct student of Wah Shun. In it, Ah Hong explicitly discusses the importance of mastering the first set, which he calls Sulin Tao, before progressing to Chum Kyu, then Putzi. This is a direct student of Wah Shun, describing the three forms as part of the system. There's also Chan Yumin students, for instance, Wang Yangzi, who was born in 1926 and became a student of Chan Yumin's sons in the early 1950s. He learnt the three forms and passed them on throughout his teaching career. His personal handwritten notes describe the forms in details actually. At some point in the early 1980s, he became a hermit with no contact with the outside world, which means his knowledge of these forms existed entirely independent of any later influence. His more well-known students have also confirmed that they learned these forms directly from him. Chan Gao-lim, the son of Chan Yumin and grandson in lineage to Wah Shun, wrote a document describing the style he had inherited, including the name of the three forms. Chan Gao-lim died in 1977. Therefore, the document describing this predates that date and is actually still displayed in his Magun in Madong village. And there you have it, another very clear data point that these forms were documented before the time period that this researcher seems to be talking about. The well-known Pan Nam began learning from Ju Chao, who was another student of Chan Yumin around 1947. He learnt the standard forms and went on to write books on Sunim Tao and other sets in the early 1980s. Those books still exist. In a Chinese TV documentary, Sifu Fok Chu, a respected senior figure, explicitly states on camera that he learnt Sunim Tao, Chung Q and Bu Ji from Yu Choi. And yes, Yu Choi had learnt from Jo Sao, who was Chan Wah Shun's student, in the 1930s. Regarding the drunk confession this researcher spoke of, the master he's referring to has sadly passed on and cannot speak for himself. But there is a key fact here. That master had students learning the three forms from him as far back as the 1960s. This is confirmed by Sifu Ho, and his own teacher, Chan Gan-lim, supported this in a written document that had already mentioned all of these details dated before his death in 1977. Whatever this researcher believes he heard, the documented record says something completely different, and you'll forgive me for not taking this person at his word. This individual, in the course of his investigations, saw fit to visit what he calls a Gulao village and suggests that the practitioners there had only recently adopted the names Sunim Tao, Chung Q, Bu Ji, along with that, the three-form structure. And they only done this to appeal to foreign students who expect to see this structure if they come to learn Wing Chun. He even claims his own video shows them admitting this. Well, there are several serious problems here. First, Gulao is not a village. It's an area comprising of 13 villages with at least 4 or 5 distinct and unique mainstreams of Wing Chun practiced there. Speaking about what Gulao Wing Chun does or does not have, as if it's one homogeneous thing, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the subject. Second thing to note is that this individual only visited a single school, and that was the school of the Gus in Dongbingfeng. He did not visit any other publicly operating Wing Chun schools in that area, including the school run by Sifu Feng. So drawing sweeping conclusions about an entire region based on one visit to one school is not research, it's tourism more than anything else. Third, watch his own video. He claims it shows the practitioners admitting that they adopted the names of the three forms to appeal to foreigners. They'd say no such thing, and that is a serious misrepresentation of what is said on the recording, and one that directly damages the reputation of the people in it. But what does he care? Fourth, and quite importantly, is the very fact that the three names of the forms have been there for quite some time, at least way before this individual insists that they have been. Anyone who has done even the most basic research into Gulao Wing Chun knows that the foundation of all of its versions are the SCWC, or the 12 sequences or hand shapes, each with their own individual name. And what you'll find amongst them are the names Sunim Tao, Chung Q and Bu Ji. These names have existed there for quite some time, and they're not some kind of recent borrowing. You have to ask yourself, why would practitioners of this style suddenly adopt names that were already there in their style? You may be asking then, why is this individual insistent on spinning this narrative? Well, it all comes down to what I told you guys and foretold in my Debunking Snake and Crane video series. You see, by insisting that Yeun Kay San taught Yip Man and then other high-profile masters, he can then draw a straight line from that knowledge all the way to Law Sifu and Snake Crane, where he proposed that Yeun Kay San learnt his Wing Chun from. But I've already debunked that by proving that the Yeun Kay San notes are older than the Snake and Crane ones. And then he can say that he owns these Snake and Crane notes of only he's been able to decipher properly, and come and see me for the purest version of Wing Chun, etc., etc. You know the drill. The evidence does not support any of his assertions, and the fact that he continues to push it after being shown the error of his ways, as I dismantled all of his narrative last time, is not really a research position he's taking. It's a choice to try and pull the wool over people's eyes. Wing Chun's history is worth protecting, not because of any one lineage being superior to the other, but because the people who lived it and taught it passed it down and deserve to have their stories told accurately. That means holding claims to proper evidential standard, being willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and being honest when the story you want to tell doesn't match the story the sources are actually telling.